Hey guys, I've been doing some testing and a little bit of content on these Craftsy headlights for the GR Corolla, and I've realized a lot of people simply don't understand automotive lighting, which is understandable because there's very little info out there. Nobody's teaching this stuff and it is very complex. I decided to make a talking video talking about basic automotive lighting, why you shouldn't use Japanese headlights on your USDM Corolla, and how different types of lighting can be an improvement or a major downgrade to your car. This isn't a video on Craftsy headlights specifically, it's a video on general lighting and how it applies to our cars. First, I wanted to show you an image of a regular headlamp output, specifically a projector headlamp. This projector was used in a ton of Toyotas, including the Prius, the Highlander, a lot of Lexus models, the Tacoma, and it is a good example of a regular, mediocre projector headlamp. I don't consider this a particularly good headlamp, but it is a very average one. To understand a headlight beam pattern, you have to understand the various aspects of it. The first aspect is width. It's self-explanatory. It's how far to the sides a projector illuminates. The second aspect is going to be the hot spot, which is that bright spot in the middle. It's responsible for your down road vision. It's meant to illuminate as far down the road as possible for optimal distance. However, you don't want it lighting up other aspects of the road because that could actually decrease vision, and that moves us into the next aspect, the foreground. The foreground is what's directly in front of your car, and there's a big misconception that if that area is brighter, the headlamp is better. But brighter doesn't always mean better. In this case, a brighter foreground basically has your pupils adjust to that bright light in front of you. They contract and you can see worse in all aspects. A good projector will have as little foreground as possible to still have vision there. You still want to see what's in front of you, but you want all the light down the road and to the sides so that your eyes will focus on that rather than what's in front of you. So brighter does not mean better, and a lot of these projectors are a good explanation of that because not every projector gets the foreground right. The next aspect to discuss is the cutoff. Now you can see a line where there's a lot of light below and almost no light above. This cutoff is to prevent blinding people. And an aspect of the cutoff that's important to this discussion is that little step right in the middle. You can see there's a step where the left side is lower and the right side is higher, and this is for left-hand drive markets like the US. Basically, it's to prevent oncoming traffic from being blinded while still giving you optimal distance vision. You want the right side to be higher, to be off into the distance, while the left side's lower so that oncoming traffic doesn't get as much light in their faces. Every headlight has a cutoff and a step. Some headlights have a big flare rather than a step, but those have been out of fashion for some time. But this is a very important part of the discussion. And the last part to look at here is that rectangle of light above the cutoff. Now you'd think that no glare is important, but the US Department of Transportation actually specs a minimum amount of glare. This is generally referred to as a squirrel spotter. It is meant to light up road signs so that you can see what you're doing and where you're going. It's only enough light to really light up a reflective road sign. It's not going to illuminate much for you. The name squirrel spotter is more of a joke, but if you look at it on a wall, you'll be able to see it, but on the road, it's only going to be a couple lux and it's not going to blind anybody. However, it is a critical part of the beam pattern. This next image shows a highly modified projector, so it's not really representative of your average headlight, but there are aspects of the beam pattern I wanted to explain that show what a good beam pattern looks like. This projector is out of a third generation Lexus RX 350, and aspects of it have been modified, like a clear lens and a shifted cutoff shield. So you'll see that the cutoff is extremely sharp and colorful, but other aspects of the beam pattern are OEM, and they're one of the best on the market. So you can see that there's a very, very bright hot spot, but it's very short. There's a big dim section under it. That dim section means that your foreground is going to be very dark and your distance vision is going to be excellent. You could also see that there's a foreground limiter that completely cuts off the light below a certain point, which is another great thing here, and the width is excellent. This projector has a bit of a bigger step in the cutoff, which illustrates what a step is supposed to look like a little better than the last one, but this is also a left-hand drive projector, so you have the right side higher than the left for optimal vision. and this is what causes the biggest amount of problems in JDM headlights. This image is from an article on a site by a manufacturer called Oxito. Not necessarily recommending them, but it's a good example of how the beam pattern interacts with the road, just a little bit more extreme because it's on a slope. The left side is going to be lower, not to blind oncoming traffic, and the right side is going to be higher because it goes further down the road. This is how it's supposed to look like in any left-hand drive country. Now this next image is my own 1996 Corolla from my youth running factory JDM headlights, and you can see that they are blinding oncoming traffic pretty badly. This is not something I would ever recommend anyone does, and I did it when I didn't know much better about lighting at all, and I quickly switched away from them when I did find out. But this is a good example of why JDM headlights are a bad idea. This next image shows that same RX350 projector that I showed before, but flipped to show what a right-hand drive beam pattern will look like. The cutoff is completely flipped so that the left side is now higher than the right. And you'll hear this big misconception that you can just aim the headlights lower and it'll be fine. But that's not how it works. Since the left side is higher, if you aim it so that the left side is lined up with where a traditional left-hand drive projector would be on the left, now the right side is far too low, and that hot spot that's supposed to be shining down the road is now shining at the ground. So you've lost all of your distance vision, and now you're putting yourself into an unsafe situation. The only way to get your distance vision back is to line up the right side with where a normal projector for left-hand drive would be on the right. That now means the left side is far too high and you're blinding everybody that's driving towards you. Both situations are deeply unsafe and should not be done. This misconception is part of why a lot of people buy those JDM headlights, and this misconception is exactly why you should never run JDM headlights on a USDM car, no matter what. Now, I'm not saying the USDM headlights are particularly great. In fact, I have major beef with them, which is why I'm exploring other options. The main thing is that DRLs are meant to blind you slightly. That's why they're usually a LED array that's diffused. They catch your attention during the day, making you more visible. The GR Corolla and all USDM Corollas use the low beam as a DRL, which has a cutoff, making it literally useless as a DRL. Now that makes the car a lot more unsafe in my opinion, because DRLs are proven to increase safety, and that makes the USDM headlights subpar. There's also the fact that the LED swoop, that's the parking light, is surprisingly dim on these cars. That's more of an aesthetic thing, but I think it's a big downgrade compared to other cars. Another issue I have with the Corolla headlights is the beam pattern. On screen right now is the beam pattern of a GR Corolla or a Corolla hatchback. Their projector is made by Ichiko, and it has this big scoop taken out of it to the left of the step. This scoop is to pass DOT regulations. They have a test point there that is supposed to be dimmer than the rest of the beam pattern, so that when you're driving during rain, that part of the road in front of oncoming traffic doesn't reflect too brightly up at them off the wet road and blind them. Now, other manufacturers go about it in better ways. They make that section dimmer, not take a whole scoop out of it. So that scoop is particularly distracting and annoying, especially when taking turns. It just makes a whole section of the road dark, and I consider it to be deeply suboptimal. So there's plenty of improvements to be made to the factory headlights, which is why I'm exploring other options like Craft C. But it also doesn't mean that you should be running JDM headlights, because they're far worse in terms of safety than the factory ones. I also took a photo of the Craft C headlight output in the same way I did the factory headlight output. This is not exposure locked, so you cannot directly compare the brightness, but you can compare the beam pattern, and you can see that these headlights have a much more traditional beam pattern style with no cutout in the cutoff. So these are actually arguably safer headlights for the road. This is not a review. This has not been sponsored by Craft C, and I will be doing a lot more testing, including exposure locked photography and lux testing with a lux meter. So keep an eye out for that. But this is a good example of the difference between the factory headlights and something aftermarket. I hope this information is helpful to some people. I think it's important to understand lighting, especially if you're modifying it. Lighting is a safety device. It is not something to play around with, and you must have good lighting and good safety on your car first and foremost, no matter how it looks. So if we're going to be modifying lighting, I want us to do it right. And JDM headlights are not the way to go about this. I think that they're wrong to run on any street car in the US. I've seen some people run them on track cars for that bright DRL. Perfect use case for them. But if you're going to be running the car on the street, and I know 99.9% of people will, let's do this right and install a safe headlight. See ya.